Hi, Mike Kennedy with you. Here we are sizzling in Gorham. My goodness, we got days where it's 85 every day. It's like, that isn't Maine weather. What's it doing? At least the nights are cooling back down some. I remember there was a week many years ago where it was like above 100 for like 3 or 4 days. Officially, an extreme heat situation. And that was bad. But this is longer. It's, consistently hot and muggy. But like I say, at the night it cools down, at least where I live. Now, my house is built on a slab, which they shouldn't do in Maine anyway. But the slab, besides being on a slab, the slab is too thin. And there appeared to be no moisture barrier put in between the slab and the house. So, we get moisture in the house. And, but to some degree, that helps. We've got trees around. That helps keep our house cool until we get in the periods where the temperature's really up high. Then the house starts warming up. But if we have 1 or 2 days of, 80 plus weather, the house stays cool because in the night it recaptures and everything. But my goodness, hot. So, Alone didn't play last week because of July 4th. So we have season 11, episode 4. Spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. Don't listen. I'm going to tell you what happened and mention some things. I like accents. I like listening to people with accents. And one thing I especially like is when, I don't know, sometimes we think society tells us that certain prejudice is about certain accents or areas or whatever that that these people are dumb hillbillies or whatever, things like that. Well, one reason I like it is because you have people like that on the show and they turn out to really have some brains, I'll tell you. It really shows up the people that think, you've got to talk a certain way to, be a certain type of person. But I thought this was to me was quite amazing. So the character's name, I believe the contestant is William. And so what's different about him is, okay, he's saying he sees some grouse, okay, and saying, well, he's got this accent. They're even putting Labrador accent, and they're even putting, some words below, so you can understand what he's saying, because he's got a thick accent, right? And so he's saying, well, I'm not much of a archer, but I can do this. And so what he does, and I've never seen this before, he gets a long, thin pole, branch. He cut everything off of it, and he attaches a snare to the end of it. So it's, a snare, a wire, and it's got the loop. And so if something goes through that and tries to keep going, it's gonna, clamp down on them. And if the neck goes, that's where the neck is, it's going to kill the animal. So he makes this thing, and with a lot of patience, he walks over to where these birds are. Now, to be fair, these birds may have never encountered a human being, so they, to some degree, maybe they don't even know what's going on. But he goes out there, he's very methodical, and he gets that noose right by them. And at one point, they decide, I don't like this. This is too close. They take off and go right into the snare, and he's got them. And he does it, and then I don't know if there was some editing between this, he goes right back and gets another one, which is, I just have never seen that hunting technique before. And he was very good at it. Although, sometimes you see people doing something and you say, don't do that, don't do that. Well, in the previous show, he had made some food caches where he put food in places so that he could get it later on. Well, he went back to those places and the food was gone. Sarah, who's a is doing something with fishing, and she's going to do something with, she has some of the guts out of a fish that she's saved, and she goes to use them, and they're gone. And it's like, yeah, there's all these things running around. Once it's dark, you don't know if there's 100 mice out there running through. You got birds, you got all these different things, daylight and otherwise, that are combing the area when you're not around. Squirrels. I know in one of the Alone seasons, they had quite a difficulty with mice in the cabins. And you couldn't eat the mice because there was some disease they carried. But one guy eventually made deadfalls within his shelter and started killing the mice because the mice will chew at a sleeping bag to get the thing out of it. And you can have some really expensive equipment that can be ruined quite quickly with mice. You wouldn't think so, but you watch a show like that, you find out it's true. So this thing by him, the hunting method that William used, is really, really amazing. I just never saw it before, but I remember the show once, and they had an Eskimo woman, and this guy, she's traveling with this guy, and it's back when Eskimos had to wear numbers. This was like, almost like, putting stars on Jews to be rounded up, but Eskimos had to wear a number around them so they could be identified by the government. But they're hungry and somewhere, and she finds a hole where an animal is. And she gets there, and she's got some kind of thing to snare it with. And she sits there for hours, motionless. And sure enough, something comes out, and she gets it. They got something to eat. But again, an extreme amount of patience. So I thought that aspect was really something. And one guy, the guy with a southern accent, and he's built this really good shelter and different things. But the problem is he's got a really bad stomachache. And he comes out and confesses that he hasn't gone to the bathroom in 10 days. He's been there 10 days and nothing's happened. He's got this intense pain and he taps out. And they say in the little, they put the little things, text under there for you to read. And they said, some people have even had heart attacks from that and died. You wouldn't think that, but of course, your system's plugged up and, it's like a little bomb waiting to go off. So he ends up tapping out and really feels bad about it. And he's built this really good shelter that he could go all winter in. So, going out on day 10 is definitely not what he wanted to do, but, and the guy that, this Jake guy, he's the one that lost the fishing line. I believe he was, but he burns himself quite badly. And I notice this at home. I almost have a tendency to do this. You have a glove or you have a pot holder, and you're careful holding things. But every once in a while, I've noticed my hand will go towards something, like to pick it up, and I go, oh, no, I don't have the right thing. I can't do that. Well, evidently he thought, well, I can take this dried grass and use it as a pot holder. Well, he couldn't. I mean, the handle of the pot burns him, and then he spills it, and the hot liquid burns his other hand. Now, they've got an emergency medical kit with them, so I don't know how that's going to be because it's extremely painful. I don't know if that will hamper him being able to get food or doing whatever else he has to do, because that's gotta heal. And he's just had a lot of bad luck. Some people say, well, it's all skill. You're out there. The guy with the best skills is going to win. And it's like, nope, that's not true. There's a lot of unknown things that just happen. Like someone loses the fishing line. There was one season where on day 3, this guy lost the ferrocerium rod to start fires, and he wasn't up on friction fire, so he basically knew he could not get a fire going, and he taps out. Now, you could look back and say, well, he should have stayed 24 hours more, and he should have, tried for a couple hours. I mean, I've seen people on some of the shows. There was this one episode where Andrew Zimmer, the food guy that does bizarre foods, was out being trained to be in a survival situation. And the guy who's training him is Michael Hawk. And, of course, he hasn't gotten his own shows yet at this point, I believe. So he's just there as an instructor. Because, he's talking, who he is and everything. And they're having trouble getting fire. And that Mike Hawk spends hours till he gets a fire going. Literally hours. And luckily, when Andrew Zimmer's on his own, he ends up getting the fire sooner. But it's like, you just can't count on things, And yeah, the person with the most skills is usually going to be the one who survives. But a lot of times it's just luck. Sometimes people do the exact opposite of what they should do, and they survive and people don't. Les Stroud wrote this book where I forget the name of it, but he analyzed people's survival situations. And he said their skill set, their kit, what they had for them equipment, and luck. Okay? So there's this one woman, this plane goes down in the jungle, and they're like in Brazil or somewhere else where the jungle's really dense. And so they're saying, everybody says, well, no, we got to stay together. Got to stay together. And the girl says, no, I'm going to walk this direction because I know such and such a village is that way. We'll come to find out the village is exactly 180 degrees different, and she's walking the wrong direction. But what happens? She runs into someone, she gets rescued, and the whole party that stays with the plane dies. They all die. And so here you have someone doing, you're supposed to stay with the vehicle, you're supposed to know which direction you're going, and you certainly want to go by yourself alone, and she does all of this wrong, and she's the one that survives. And, who are the real survivors now? I would say they're the homeless people. You look at some of the situations the homeless people live in, and I'm not necessarily talking about the ones that, they basically have this huge tent and all this stuff like that. There's just a lot of people who don't have any of that and still survive through the winters in Maine. Now, the homeless population tends to get smaller in Maine because they go warmer places. And it's always a battle because if you have extra beds, extra homeless people will come. You can't say, like, let's just make up, Portland, Maine has usually 300 homeless people. They need 300 beds every night. They say, good, we've only got 200 beds, we'll put in 300 beds. Well, what happens is extra people come. When homeless people know the area has services, they go there. Because they're not dumb, They're doing what they need to do to survive, but it makes it frustrating for the towns and municipalities because it's like an endless problem that can't be solved by just the local people. Because if Maine, let's just say Maine, all of a sudden Elon Musk gives a big donation to Portland, Maine for a homeless shelter, and we put in a 2,000 bed facility, I guarantee you within a year there's going to be 2,000 more homeless people in the state of Maine sleeping in those beds. And they're going to be from all over the country. So it's a difficult situation. But, I'm just saying they're some of the real survivors. Another survivor, now my wife is reading the book, so I'll give you more information as she finishes it. But there's this guy in Maine. Okay, he buys a new car. He's driving around. He just drives until it runs out of gas. He's on some back road, runs out of gas. Leaves the car there and starts walking. And he basically walks till he wants to stop. And he makes a secret camp there, and he lives in the Maine woods alone for 20 plus years. How does he survive? He steals. He steals food. He steals, propane cylinders. Whatever he needs to do, he steals. And eventually, people don't know where he is, but people know this is happening. He only breaks into camps. He's only breaking into seasonal buildings. But, any seasonal camp is going to have food in it for the next season and different things like that. So he breaks into these. Eventually, people in the camps in that area start leaving boxes of food out for him. In other words, you come up to this cabin, and there's a box on the steps, and there's canned meat and different things in there. Well, he takes that, and he doesn't bother to break in. Well, eventually, he gets caught, after 22 years. And the point at which my wife is reading the book now, he's actually in jail. But I believe he gets released. I could be wrong, so I'll update you on this. But it seems like such a bizarre occurrence for someone to just, and supposedly at this point in the book, they're saying there was nothing big in his life. There was absolutely no reason for him to do what he did. It wasn't like the police were looking at for him, the mafia was, or, he didn't want to pay alimony or child support or, some crazy thing. And he just did it. He just seemed to drop out of society for no apparent reason. And I'll remain there for 22 years. And he was very elaborate in what he did. He wouldn't heat his area with wood because he was afraid they'd see the smoke. Okay? When new snow was out, he wouldn't go out of his cabin because people could follow those tracks back. So, he only went out when he was sure that no one could follow his tracks to come back. He even though the local area, it made the news. I watched the news when they found him, and they showed his shelter and stuff. And it was kind of a mess of, tarps and different things and propane tanks and stuff. But he only used the propane tanks to heat food. I guess he never used it to keep himself warm. I don't know whether he had, he stole 20 sleeping bags or what. But very bizarre. But I'll keep you updated on that. Someone who was an actual, you could say, survivor and who used theft to survive with. And if you want to see kind of an unbelievable survival story that's true, Daniel Craig was in this movie. The guy that plays James Bond was playing James Bond. And it's called, I believe it's called Defiance. And it's about 2,000 Jews who lived in the forest to escape the Nazis. And they did it throughout the war. Like, how could 2,000 people hide themselves? But they went out there, they built schools, they had a hospital, and, every once in a while they'd move somewhere else. And it's just, that's an amazing story. I'm sure it's in a book, but the movie by Daniel Craig was really good. And, evidently it was fairly accurate to what actually happened. But so there we go. Season 4, we have the guy tap out because of this. He's obviously experiencing a stoppage in his pipes, and it's really beginning to hurt, and his body's saying, you need to get out of here and take care of that. Now, sometimes they don't follow up. They don't necessarily have a follow-up show, but it's like, we've seen this guy for 10 days. We'd like to know what happened to him. So please, Alone, tell us. But there we go. We'll see it next week.